Hello everyone, it's March and I'm so excited to be doing clay. I hope you guys are so excited too. This year we are doing something very different that we've never done before, and the entire school is going to do the same project. So we can all have a clay project this year. The cool thing about these is you get to make the shape of your own hand, and also you get to be super creative on the design that you put on it. And then we will dry them and put them in the kiln, and then you also get to paint them and make them even more creative. I want you to look at these examples and look at the details, how they made impressions, like the fingernails were done with a toothpick, and then tools or pasta, what we've given you to create the design. So in the palm area, you can see that there's a lot more surface area, so you can do bigger designs in there. And as you can see in this one, like there's a heart with a toothpick in the middle, and then impressions from the pasta. And then she decided to do designs similar up each finger. And in this one, you can see so much texture from each element. Looks like there's some hearts that were drawn, some lines that were drawn. And in this one, she decided to do different things up each finger. So you get to decide whatever you want to do. It will be super fun. And also the details in this one. This year, we're going to work together. We're going to work kind of slowly, kind of step by step. So everybody is kind of on the same page. And when we get to the point of design, then you guys can just carry on. But it's going to be a little slower, and we're just going to all work together so we can be all on the same page. Here's another example of just painting them. And so I'm so excited. Here we go. Okay, guys. So, like we start out all art projects, we'll go through the supplies that you guys are going to need. You are going to need, from your desk, a pair of scissors. And the clay kits have everything else that you need. So you will need the pipe. It's like a little PVC pipe to roll. There's a little bag that's got paper towel, some sticks, some pasta in there. And then there's another separate bag inside of there that has your ball of clay. You will also need from your other art kit your desk protector. And there is, I think we put one extra in each class in case somebody doesn't have one. So you'll need to cut this in half. We want to save half of it for another art project another day. If there's paint or marker on here, don't worry about it. If it gets on your clay a little bit, it's not a big deal. It will burn off when we cook it, and you're going to paint it also. So don't worry about if your protector is a little bit, has some paint and marker and stuff on it. So we need to cut this in half. So I want you to lay it out on your desk where it's widest to each side. And then I want you to cut it or tear it down the middle. Now if we cut it the long ways, it will make a long strip. I want two squares that we can work on. So cut it down the middle from the short end, and to make two squares that we can use. I want you to put the other piece back in your art kit, and we'll just use one for our clay today. So the paper is very important for clay, probably more than any of the art projects, because when we do our clay, when you're rolling it on your desk, it will stick to your desk and it will be really hard to get off. You'll have to push it and smush it, and your shape will be lost. So it's very important that this protector is on your desk when we work with our clay, because that makes it easy to peel off, and we can smooth out the back and put your name on it. So you'll need to, and we'll need to dry it. So make sure that you have this on your desk. The second thing you will need to do before we get started is to get your paper towel out. Now this paper towel has two functions. It's to get your finger wet when you need to smooth your clay. We're going to smooth the edges. We're going to smooth down when we do a pattern. So these edges right here will get smoothed, and then when you use a toothpick to create a pattern, you'll need to just kind of smooth it and pat it down. So you'll need to get this wet. I want it pretty wet. I don't want it, I need it so you can get your fingers, I don't want it dripping all over the place. I want it, so get a little bit of water in it and just kind of squeeze out about half of it. And so it's wet, but not dripping all over the place. And when you bring it back to your desk, very important not to put it on this sheet desk protector, because it makes it crinkle and absorb water and it'll spread. So keep it just off of your paper on your desk, just to the side or to the top, your wet paper towel. And also the clay cannot go in the pipes in the sink. So this paper towel, after you have used it just as to get your finger wet, you will also use it to wipe all the clay off of your hands before you wash them. So you will use it to get the clay from around your fingers. If you have any pieces or just the clay on your hands, you will use it to wipe all that off, then put it in the garbage, and then you can wash your hands with soap and water, because we don't want to get any clay in the school's plumbing. They wouldn't be very happy. So take your paper towel over, however your teacher wants to organize that. And then here's where I'd like you to pause it. We're going to work kind of step by step until we get to the creative part, because I want everybody to kind of be on the same page as we work through this. So we'll do step 1, we'll pause, we'll do step 2, we'll pause, and just keep going through until pretty much the very end. So when everybody has their paper towel, their paper set up, and all the art supplies that they need out, then we will get started. Okay, so once you have all your supplies, I would like you to get your clay out of the bag. There is a paper towel in there that was just to keep it moist. So I want you to leave that in there. You just need your ball of clay. Some balls of clay will be circular, some will be square, some will have pieces. We'll work through that. So the first thing and the funnest thing to do is to wedge your clay. And the point of wedging is to make sure there's no air inside of the clay. We don't want it to pop and break your art in the kiln. So we want to make sure there's no air in there. And it also kind of gets the clay moving, so it's easier to work with. So throughout this, most of the art project, I want you guys to stand up. You're going to need your body weight to roll. You're going to need to see what you're doing when you're tracing out your hand. So I want you guys to stand up. And wedging clay is simply just throwing it down on your paper. So I want you to pick it up and throw it down. And when you slam it, it will make a smooth side, and then just keep turning it and slamming it. We want to create a cube with this. So I want you to work all the way around to make kind of a cube. If it's not a perfect cube, that's okay too. So at least 10 times I want you to slam it down. It feels so good. And once you have kind of a square, I want you to just set it down, and then let's wait for everybody to get on the same page, and then we'll do the next step. So once you have your, mine's kind of a rectangle, we'll want to smash it down a little bit. It's really hard to roll something this tall. So I want you to take your hands kind of like a pincher, kind of like just your thumb, kind of like a crabby claw. And I want you just to smush it a little bit, just to make it not as tall. I don't want it as flat as our project's gonna be, but I just want it to be easier for you guys to roll. So I want you to take your little crabby claw and smoosh it down for me. And then this is another time to pause. So when everybody's on the same level, then we'll get to rolling. Okay, now we get to roll out our clay. So we're going to use our PVC pipe as our roller. A couple things about rolling out your clay. You want to keep even pressure on your PVC pipe so it doesn't tip and wobble as you go back and forth. You want to keep it about from your pinky finger to your the palm of your hand so you get a lot of surface area, so it's easy to, it keeps it more stable. And we want to kind of do a small motion. If we go off of our hands, it's going to tip and wobble and our pipe will kind of fall down. And if we go off of our fingertips, it's also going to make wavy kind of patterns in our clay. So we want to use some gentle pressure. Again, we're standing up, so just don't push too hard into your clay. If you make a big divot and an impression in your clay, it's really hard to roll that out later. So we want to just keep the pressure even. If your clay gets too big and you need to move your hand, that's okay, but we want it to be stable. Another thing too is we don't want to go off of our clay. When we go off of our clay, it gets stuck to our pipe and it gets really thin at that top where we went over the edge. If your finger, when you cut out your hand, is at that edge, it will break off and it'll be really fragile. So I want you to stay inside the clay. I don't want you to go off of it. We're just going to roll back and forth. If we need to stop and move our pipe, we should do that. When you get to the point that you feel like your hand will fit on your clay, that's when you stop and assess. So I'm going to see, that looks pretty close. I'm going to see how my hand is doing. My width is pretty good. I have lots of room on both sides of my fingers, but my big finger is hanging off, and also the palm of my hand has got a little edge here, but not my hand's hanging off over here. So I definitely need to roll it a little bit more. So I'm going to keep rolling. I'm going to also look at my clay to see how the thickness is. Sometimes in the middle it becomes a little thicker and wider. I want it to be consistent. We want it to be the same thickness all the way through. So take a look at it, and it's a little bit high right here. It's a little bit high right here. So I'm kind of going to focus my rolling on where it needs to roll down. Right there, close to the end, but not at the end. I'm going to keep rolling because I need a little bit more width for my hand to fully fit on there. All right, so I've got that. Now my fingers fit just fine. I've got plenty of room in the side, but my palm, my hand is still hanging off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my paper and I'm going to make it a little bit wider just on the bottom here where my hand can fit better. So I'm using the same rolling motion, going back and forth, and I'm going to make it just wider there, kind of a little bit all the way through, but mainly down here. And if I need to go a little wider here or here, I can also turn on an angle if I need to, just to get my hand to fit on there. And then I'm gonna again assess, what do I have? And I keep my fingers in tight. I've got room at the top. I've got clay on both sides of my hand, so I'm pretty good. I'm gonna go a little bit higher. I'm gonna roll just a little bit longer because my finger's close to that narrow edge that I made when I went off of my clay. So I'm just gonna go a tiny bit farther. And then I'm gonna look again. And I feel better about that. It's not as close to that really small edge that I made. So this is where I'm gonna stop. And then once everybody's on the same page, we will trace out our hands. Okay, now we're ready to trace our hands. So when we put our hands down, we want to make sure our fingers and our thumbs are pulled in tight. We want to make sure that we've got space around our whole hand and the palm. Our toothpick, we want to be straight up and down. We don't want it on an angle. When we kind of trace on an angle, it makes a little bit of a flap in the clay. And that's going to be hard to follow later on. So we also don't want to dig into the clay with our toothpick. We're just kind of gently scratching. We're not cutting right now. So we're going to take our toothpick. You can hold it however's comfortable for you. And we are going to lightly trace all the way around our hand, starting at one side and just lightly kind of scratching the surface of the clay. And we're just lightly following around our hand. And we'll do in between the fingers after. We're going to do the outside first and just kind of drive your toothpick around, straight up and down. Make sure your thumb is tucked in. right. And once you have your whole hand done, we'll wipe off the clay off the tip of the toothpick and we'll do our fingers. So you want to start where your fingers meet your hand and work out. So start here and just gently drag it all the way to the end. And keep doing that till you've done all of your fingers. And then your thumb. Okay, and once you're done with that, wipe the extra clay off of your toothpick and then look at the bottom of your hand. And you might have missed a spot here or there like I did on my thumb, and that's okay. If you can reconnect it, or you can do it when you cut. The bottom you'll need to connect. I would just keep it going around. So clean off the clay and just kind of follow and connect the two lines. And if it's not perfect, that's okay. When we cut it, we're going to kind of reshape the edges anyway. So it just has to keep that kind of the general form. All right, and when everybody's done tracing their hand, we will start to cut. Okay, now we are going to cut out our hand with our little craft stick here. We're going to use this narrow edge to press into the clay and drag it across. I want you to hold your stick on an angle, kind of tight, and then you can either put your finger out to kind of increase the pressure, or you can just hold on to it real tight. What we're going to do is we're going to press down all the way down to our desk, and then while we're pressing, we're going to drag and press at the same time so we can get all the clay off of the edge. Just like that. Now the straight lines are the easiest to do. And when we get to the fingertips, we will stand up our stick straight up and kind of slowly drag it around the fingers, because it's a little easier to drag it and curve it with it up and down. So, and I want your fingers to be close to you, so it's easier to work on than to reach across your desk. So let's start with the straight edges and then we'll work around. So I'm going to take my stick, I'm going to press it into my line, and because we're on an angle and we're standing up, we can put some good pressure on here. I want you to hold your paper with your other hand so it doesn't shift around while you're trying to drag this. So I'm going to press it into my clay, and I'm going to look to the side and watch where my stick is going so I can follow along on the line. So we're going to go slow. We're going to take our time to do this. And I'm going to turn my paper if I need to so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to press and drag very slow. My paper's starting to move, so I'm going to hold it up a little higher. I'm going to watch carefully and slowly going around. I'm going to turn my paper a little bit more. I'm going to turn it a little bit more. And when I get to my finger, we're going to have to make kind of a sharp turn. So I'm going to turn my paper even more. I'm going to stand up my stick, and then I'm going to slowly go around my finger and stop when I get to the other finger. And pick up my stick. And at this point, I want you to just cut off this piece right here, just to get it out of our way. Just flop it over there. Okay, and then we're going to go on to our next finger. So we're going to start, this is kind of a straight line again, so I'm going to turn my paper, and we'll smooth out the edges, so don't worry if they're a little bit wonky just for a minute. So I'm going to press down into my clay here, so you can see it better. And then I'm going to go on an angle. I'm going to drag, I'm holding onto my paper, I'm dragging around my finger, and then I'm going to stand my stick up, and I'm just going to kind of twist it around that finger and move my hand so I can pull against it. There we go. Perfect. And I'm going to cut that little piece off too to get it out of my way. There we go. Okay. And again, this is the tricky part, so I'm going to go over it one more time with you. So we're going to press into our clay all the way down, and my stick's going to be straight up and down for this. And I'm just going to turn my paper and pull and press my stick, the same that I was doing before. I'm pressing down against my desk and I'm pulling towards the fingers here, pressing and pulling and turning my paper as I need to. And when I get to the other finger, I'm going to stop again. I'm just going to move this piece of clay over a little bit just to give me some space. Okay, and then continue to the next finger. So I'm going to press into the clay, and my stick is still straight up and down, and I'm going to just turn it and move it to there till I get to the straight part. And then I'm going to stop because I'm going to do my straight part so much easier on an angle. The fingers are the trickiest parts. So then I'm going to do this straight, and then I'm going to do the back of it, this straight part, and then I'll do my thumb in the way we did the others. So keep working on your clay. We'll fix all these kind of finger shapes when we smooth out our edges, so don't worry if they're a little pointy, we'll work on that. So everyone get to the point and we'll go on to the next together. Okay, now that you've got your hand all cut out, now we are going to move on to the next step. These extra pieces that you have, you cut off, I want you to squish them into a ball for me and put them back in your bag with your paper towel to keep it from drying out. And seal that up. And we're going to use that as kind of our template later on. So our first step is we're going to pick up our slab of clay and we're going to look at the thickness of it. Should be consistent. Should be about as thick as like kind of, this is not like an Amazon box cardboard, this is more like thick cardboard, so we want it about that thick. I'm going to flip it upside down because our first step we're going to write our name in, like any art project that we do. So I'm going to have you turn it to the side, it'll be easier to write that way. And with our toothpick, we are going to write our name and our teacher code in here. This will be good practice for us to when we're doing our design because it's going to the same steps. So the first step, like we did with our fingers, we are going to go hold our toothpick straight up and we are going to go kind of scratch or carve into our clay. And we're not going very deep. If we go all the way down to our desk, we are going to have holes on the other side where we'll be able to see it. So we're just scratching the surface, not very deep, just lightly scratching. And as you can see, I've got little pieces of clay. So like when we're doing our designs on the other side, we're going to brush off these pieces. We're going to tap down to smooth out that surface so it's not sticking up. And it kind of filled in a little bit. So I'm going to go over it again. Scratching lightly. I don't want to go all the way through because I don't want to see it on the other side. Okay. I'm going to take this off of my toothpick for next time. I'm going to brush off these pieces and I'm going to tap it down. And then I'm going to go on to my next letter. And I want you to write your whole name. All right. Brush and tap. As you can see, it filled in a little bit, but that's okay. I got my trusty toothpick here. I'm going to do it again. Brush and tap. And now it's good. I also want you to put your kind of a grade teacher code on here so we know whose is whose when we put them in the kiln. If you are in kindergarten, you're going to put a little bitty K under your name. If you're in first grade, you'll put a 1, second grade, you'll put a 2, and so on. So K, and you'll put a little line, and then you'll have a number code for your teacher. So say kindergarten, Mrs. Robinson's going to be a number 2 because she is an R. She's in alphabetical order. She is going to be the second teacher of the kindergartners. And we'll send an email with your teacher code so they'll know, make it easier for you. So when you've got your full name and your teacher code, then you are ready for the next step. All right, our next step is we are going to round the edges of our clay. Our clay is kind of squared off right now. It's got an edge here, a flat edge here, and on either side. But our hands are rounded. They're not flat. So we're going to, this is where we're going to use our paper towel. I'm going to get my finger wet on my paper towel just my pointy finger here. And if your paper towel's not wet enough, just put a little bit more water, just a few drips on top should do it. So I'm going to get my finger wet, and I'm going to put some light pressure, and I'm going to rub these edges down because it's kind of a square right now. So it's got 3 flat edges, and we need to smooth out kind of the tip of the triangle. So I'm going to go around and smooth out all these edges. And when I go around, I'm also looking to see if I've got extra pieces of clay too. And you can definitely turn your paper when you're going around. I want all of the edges to be rounded. So when you're going around this, I want you to lift up your clay a little and see what it's doing on the flat surface too, to make sure there's no bumps or cracks, because you're going to see this edge when you're looking at your clay, because it's going to kind of make a kind of a bowl shape here. So we want this edge to be pretty. We want to make sure that it's smooth and look really nice also. So I'm going to keep working around my paper, smoothing my edge. And this technique is also going to be what we're going to do if we make a mistake on the front. You see I have some little cracks and holes here? That is going to be good practice for you if you make a mistake on the top of your clay. So we're going to put a little bit of pressure, and we're just going to kind of rub side to side and back and forth to fill in this little crack. And that's the same you'll do on the front if you need to. Okay, we're going to keep turning our paper. We're going to kind of lift. Oh, I got lots of stuff on this edge here. So I'm going to take my wet finger and I'm going to brush that off. I'm going to smooth that out too. There we go. Okay, that looks nice. I'm going to go around, and this is where you can kind of look at your fingers also to see if my fingers have extra pieces of clay on them, or if this has got a piece here, I can use my finger to get it out, or I can use my toothpick. I can pull off these little extra pieces. Right here I've got an extra piece. You can also smooth those out. So get my finger wet. I'm going to smooth that top of the triangle here. There we go. And then I'm going to look at that finger. I'm going to smooth out the side. And we're going to do this to this side, and then we're going to flip it over and do it to the other side. There we go. So once you've done all the way around your hand, just some light pressure smoothing out that triangle tip and just rounding the side of the clay, then we're going to flip it over, and we're going to do it on this side too. And brush off my extra pieces there. And now, since I've done the sides, I've done the small flat edge here, I've done the bottom, now this time I can just smooth out this side of the triangle. And I have a crack in my hand here too, so I can smooth that out if I want, or I can leave it if I like it. Now we're not smoothing out our lines where our fingers were, but if I have extra pieces, I can brush those off. All right, just make sure my finger is wet, just some light pressure, and just rounding all of the edges. And taking a look at the front of my fingers and see that one's got a lot of bumpy parts on it, so I'm just gonna smooth it out just a little bit. I'm gonna use my wet finger and get as wet as much as I need to. I'm gonna round the top of that. And if my finger's really pointy, I can rub on it a little extra and round it down a little bit. Here's a piece of clay there. So this will take you a little time, but I think it will look really nice to have a kind of a rounded edge. Looks more like your hand. So keep working on that, and when we are done with all of our edges, then we will move on to the next step. All right, so before we get started on the design, I want to make sure that our lines are deep enough here, because if I pat these down, sometimes they fill in because we just barely scratched the surface. So on this step, I want you just to go over these lines. So start again where your hand was, and we're just going to drag the same line. I just want it to be a little bit deeper. I don't want this to be all the way down to the desk. I want it just to be a little bit deeper than it was. So clean off your toothpick, brush off the pieces, and then pat it. And what patting does is it just softens the edges so they don't stick up and they're not rough. When we dry the clay, we want to have kind of a smooth surface. And I want you to go down each finger, your toothpick straight up, and just follow that same line, just going just a little bit deeper, just to make sure that we can see our finger lines, because we don't want to lose those. I'm brushing and I'm tapping. This is also good practice for your designs. And I have a piece right here in my finger crack, so I'm just going to scrape it out there, and I'm going to tap it down again. So go over your lines again, and then we will do our fingernails and then our pattern. All right, so let's quickly do our fingernails. If you want to, obviously you don't have to, but my fingernails are kind of shaped like rainbows. They go straight up, curve around, and go back down. The thumbnail is on a little bit of an angle when we have our thumbs tucked in. So you can do it the same as your fingers, or you can do it off to the side a little bit, kind of like that, however you feel like your fingernails look. So we're going to do the same technique that we did with these. You can turn your paper if you feel like it's easier, but we are going to hold our toothpick straight up and down. We are going to go down, curve around, and straight back up. If you prefer to do them just little curves across the top, you can do that also. However you feel like your fingernails look. These are a little more pointed at the top, so whatever you want to do. This is also another time that's good practice. We're going to carve into our clay and brush it and pat it, and then I'm going to go over it again because I have pieces that fell back into there. So I'm going to carve around, clean off my toothpick, brush off the extra pieces, and then pat it down. We'll do one more again. And go straight down, around, and then back up. And again, we're not pressing too hard into our clay. We don't want our fingernail to fall off when it dries. So I'm going to go around again, clean off my toothpick, brush off the pieces, and pat it down. And if I need to clean it out again, I'll do it again. So keep doing your fingernails, and then we will go on to the fun creative spot. Okay, so our last kind of step with the clay itself is we're going to do our fun design and make our impressions. So you can use this extra piece of clay that we put back in our bag. If you want to get it out and roll it out, this is a good practice thing for you. So you can, watch out for my hand there. You can roll it out. It doesn't have to be good or perfect because it's just practice. So I'm going to roll it out to give me a place to kind of try out what I'm doing. And if I have pieces of dried clay on here, I'm just going to move them out of my way. So in your bag, you have pieces of pasta. Obviously, you have your sticks that we used before. So the cool thing about pasta is they have different edges on each side. So, like this pasta is kind of shaped like a rainbow, but also a circle on the bottom. And this one's got some pokey things. So, this is where you want to just kind of try them out. Like this one obviously makes a rainbow when you press it into the clay. And that makes little circles. This pasta has a texture along the outside. You can roll that texture into your clay. You can also use the edge, kind of a teardrop shape, and make a pattern with that. This pasta also has a texture on the side. You can roll that in your clay. You can just press it. You can also use the end to make kind of squiggly pinwheel looking things. Again, your toothpick, if you want to create something different, you can make whatever you want with your toothpick and just use the same technique that we've been doing before. So if you want to make a heart, a cloud, a rainbow, an arrow, whatever creative thing you want to do, you want to do your impression and then brush off the pieces and then pat it down. The impressions with the pasta, you don't need to do that because it's pushing. The sticks and the toothpick are scratching the surface. So then you want to clean out your edge and clean off your stick. And brush and pat again. And this is where you get to be creative. You can do different patterns up each finger. The palm of your hand has the biggest area, so you can do your bigger designs there. You can do swirls, you can do hearts, you can do squiggly lines, anything that makes you happy, trees, anything nature, just whatever. The cool thing about the toothpick is you can do whatever you want to do. And so this is good to just try out your pasta and see what it does when you push it into the clay. Just try it out before you put it onto your finished project. If you run out of space on this piece of clay, just pick it up and flip it over and you have a whole nother surface to do what you want with it. So it's good to practice here. You don't have to if you don't want to, but that gives you a lot of, so you know exactly what you want. And then when you've decided, then you can start creating on your finished product. So enjoy and have so much fun. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Okay, so once you guys are all done, we are going to fold up this paper to put under our hand to shape it. We're going to make it just kind of concave, just a little bit rounded, so it's not flat. It has some shape like a dish. So we're going to use this paper to do that. Everything else can go in the garbage. So we're going to take our finished product here. We're going to brush it off, make sure it's exactly the way we want it. And we're going to set this on our plastic bag or on our desk. This paper towel that you use to wipe your finger, not the one in your bag, the other one that was in with your pasta, this is what we're going to use to wash off our hands. So I have pieces of clay that I want to brush off before I wash my hands, because I don't want them in the pipes. Once all my hands are cleaned off, I can either bring the garbage over to me or I can carry this to the garbage and dump all this stuff in. But we've got to keep this paper. It's very important. So how we are going to mold our clay is we're going to take this paper and we are going to fold it to make a kind of a pedestal that it will dry on. The kindergartners and first grade, this might be a little tricky for them, but it's pretty simple. So we're going to take our paper, which is half of the original sheet, and we're going to fold it in half. All right, and we're going to fold it in half again. And then we're going to fold it in half one more time. So 3 times we're going to fold it in half. And once we have the 3 times we're folding in half, then we're going to do it in thirds. And the point of doing it in thirds is if I fold this paper in half, it tips to the side. So when I put my clay hand on top of it, it just tips right off and it won't work. So we're going to do it in thirds 2 times. So doing it in thirds is a little tricky. You want to, this is about my halfway mark here, so I'm going to go up a little bit from it. And when I fold down that part, I'm going to notice that this and this are the same. That's how I know that I've got it in thirds. So once I've got this and this matching, I'm going to fold it down again. I'm going to do that one more time. Taking that top down, folding it down, and then one more time. All right, so what this does is this gives it a platform to dry on. So I want the bottom of these hands to be somewhat flat because I want it to sit flat on a desk or a surface. If it's really rounded on the back, it's going to wobble and tip. So this gives it a flat surface and also elevates it. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this in the center of our clay. And your teacher will have a drying board that you can put it on when it's ready. So this will go in the middle here, kind of just below where your thumb is, pretty close to that. Even in like a small hand, it's going to be just pretty close to even with the thumb. And what we're going to do is we're going to place it in there, and we're going to kind of bend and mold this clay around that. Just working our way around and bending it down. I'm just rounding all the edges. So when I set this down, it sits up on that pedestal and stays flat here. And then I want you to push it in just a little bit to make sure all of it is rounded. And if the teachers want to check them, you can lift them off and look at it. It should hold its shape for a second and then put it back down. But this is how they're going to dry. And just make sure the thumb is tucked and all the fingers are tucked. And this should take a week or two to get it completely dry. And then we'll put it in the kiln. And then you guys get to do more creative stuff and you get to paint them. So good job today. I can't wait to get them in the kiln and see what you guys have designed.